Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX. My name is Gauri Kundalia. Now, after nearly a decade of dialogue, India and Australia signed a historic economic agreement on Saturday that will reduce tariffs on more than 85% of goods exported to the South Asian country as both governments seek alternative supply chains and counter an aggressive China on the rise. As Australia grapples with China's trade restrictions on a variety of commodity exports, the trade agreement would open doors to a market of over 1.4 billion according to official estimates. The pact, we are given to understand, will significantly raise bilateral trade in goods and services to $45 to $50 billion over 5 years from around rupees $27 billion and create over 1 million jobs in India. Now, to discuss this, we have with us a panel of guests. We have Ambassador Manju Seth with us on the broadcast. Kash Jindal, senior economist, also joins us. Patikrit Payne, strategic and international affairs expert, is also on the broadcast with us. Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, is with us on the broadcast, and also with us Suresh Menon, alcohol and beverage sector expert, is with us on the broadcast. Professor Nalapat, if I could begin with you first, sir. Lots of people, world leaders, have hailed this as a watershed moment. What do you think this FTA means now for India, Australia, and the way forward?
I think it's very good news for everybody, every country that wants to keep the Indo-Pacific free, open and inclusive, as Prime Minister Modi correctly said about 3 years ago should happen. It's an excellent trade deal, and it's no accident that India has signed a trade deal with Australia far ahead of any such trade deal with the United Kingdom. The fact is, Prime Minister Scott Morrison is much more aware of the threats facing the modern world than it seems Boris Johnson is. Boris Johnson is fixated on the European Union and Europe. He doesn't seem to know that his party has gone through Brexit, and he is completely on board on a strategy of Europe first, second and last, and Asia never. Scott Morrison is different. He knows where Australia is located, and he has shown that kind of wisdom. Prime Minister Modi has done well in reciprocating that wisdom and in signing this deal. It's a very consequential deal. And for those who are saying, oh my God, the Quad is over because of Ukraine, the Quad cannot be over because of something happening in a different continent and involving a different country than the country that the Quad is facing up to. I'm not going to name that country. It's the second superpower in the world. I'm not going to name that. So it's very clear the Quad is alive and well, and not just Australia. Japan also is fully cognizant of the needs of the 21st century and the Indo-Pacific. The problem is President Biden has gone back 50 years in his thinking, as this administration has, and he's still thinking that the world is what it was 50 years ago, and it's still the big, bad, horrible Soviet Union, rather than the real challenge, which is China. Prime Minister Modi knows this very directly and has very boldly struck out a correct and independent and principled path for India in this Ukrainian conflict. Australia and Japan have been forced to make noises in support of Biden, but I think in their heart of hearts, both Japan and Australia know that the real problem is in the Indo-Pacific, and this is a very welcome development, and Australia is a very welcome partner, as is Japan, and I think every one of us should welcome the statesmanship shown by Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Morrison.
Absolutely, Professor Nalapat. Ambassador Seth, speaking of the statesmanship shown, there was this FTA was delayed for years. There was a lot of discussion. How were these issues ironed out, and what were they exactly?
I think that there was always been these concerns in India about the market being flooded by, especially dairy products and some other products from foreign countries, which will affect the local market. And also, services has been an issue over the years with different countries. We always had a problem because, as Professor Nalapat also mentioned, they wished not to change their perception about India and did not want to reduce tariffs or accommodate India, on those products which are of interest to India. But as mentioned, the Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has shown his maturity, his wisdom, that, it is in mutual interest to give these tariff sort of waivers for Indian products. And I think that has been, and also for the services sector. Services sector is a big problem with us, with most European countries, and they don't wish to acknowledge that the services sector is an important element of the bilateral relationship. And they don't want to allow this free movement of personnel and these things in the services sector. I mean, not allow in the sense they've been hesitant to to talk about that, and they are usually pushing their own products, telling India reduce tariffs on wine, reduce tariff on all their concerns, and they do not usually take on India's concerns on board. And so and that's why this particular FTA, I think, was also stuck for so long, because of these preconceived, should I say, ideas and perceptions. But now, Quad and the necessity to ensure that the Quad is strong in the face of threats faced in the Indo-Pacific. This is another milestone FTA, which is in the interest of both countries. Both Australia and India will benefit with this opening up and the signing of this treaty. And even Australian concerns have been addressed by and large, and India's concerns have also been met. So I think that is why it has moved quickly, and with, of course, with the decision making done at the highest level. And it's a very positive move, and I think we need to appreciate that this couldn't have been possible if decisions had not been taken at the highest level.
All right, we have representative from one such sector with us on the broadcast today. Suresh Menon, what does this mean specifically for the alcohol and beverages sector which you represent?
Well, the agreement specifically talks of the import of wines from Australia to India, where a phased concession over a 10-year period has been offered by the Indian government, which it is based on two different price thresholds. And as far as Australia itself is concerned, it is offered duty-free import to all alcoholic beverage products from India. So both those are win-win situations. Now, as far as India is concerned, the interest was in Australian wines, because the wine culture, drinking culture, is not very well developed in India, whereas it is so in Australia and in a few other countries around the globe. It would have definitely been worth the while if the threshold had been lower than the one that has currently been agreed upon, which is $5 a bottle, because the availability of quality wines would have ensured that the wine industry in India develops through enhanced business opportunities and practices that are followed internationally.
Okay, all right. So, Pathikrit Payne, besides the alcohol beverages sector, what are the key focus areas of this particular FTA, and how will it impact them?
Well, first of all, the reason that this FTA has fructified is because both the countries, as part of the Quad, are interested in developing a resilient supply chain which is decoupled from China. For Australia, it was important to diversify from the Chinese market. They had seen post-COVID, when they asked for an investigation into the origin of the Wuhan virus, the kind of unofficial embargoes the Chinese actually imposed on Australian exports to China, and it had a tremendous impact on the Australian economy. So they were trying to diversify. So this, free trade agreement is a great opportunity for Scott Morrison to show before the next ensuing election. This is the second major free trade agreement that Modi government has signed after the agreement with UAE, which envisions to have a $100 billion trade in the next 5 years, up from $60 billion. The reason that it is a win-win situation is this: most of the imports from Australia would be in the realm of raw materials and intermediary products. And once those things will come with reduced import duty or zero import duty in certain cases, that will only make Indian companies far more competitive. And that is a very important thing to understand, because most of the exports of Australia are raw materials. Secondly, it gives Indian companies access to the Australian market for 85% of the tariff line, or 6,000 sectors, which means that a large array of Indian products and goods and services will be going to Australia with very minimal or literally zero import duty. A very important point is that a large number of Indian students who go to Australia for education purposes, they get a post-education visa for 2 to 4 years, work visa, and that's a very important milestone in terms of acknowledging the services or manpower, proficiency or capability of India, because that has been a bone of contention for RCEP, because of which India did not sign. But India also safeguarded its agriculture sector and areas like dairy and other sectors where it has made sure those are not opened up, because it employs hundreds of millions of people in India. So while safeguarding certain areas of agriculture and certain other related sectors like dairy, India has made sure that all those sectors are opened up, where raw materials coming at a competitive price will only help India export and become far more competitive in the finished products that India make. So it's a win-win situation, and it develops a resilient supply chain which is decoupled from China, which is so very important. We have to understand, last but not the least, there is a certain level of convergence that India and Australia already has, because both are democracies, both are English-speaking countries. There are cultural affinities that both have, and it would only help these countries to become far more closer, economically, strategically, and culturally as well. And this might actually pave the way for more free trade agreement with countries like Japan as well, and some other countries. And this shows that individual free trade agreements that India signs with countries, say with UAE or Australia, are far better than the RCEP, which India did not sign, because that was an area where it would have been completely under the stranglehold of China.
Absolutely.
So it's a great thing, and this actually helps India to fulfill the dream of becoming a $10 trillion economy in the by 2032 or 33.
Okay. Akash Jindal, do you think then this FTA really signifies that Australia has positively moved beyond its economic and trade dependence on China?
Definitely. See, now Australia already knows China much better than Australia used to know China 5 years ago. So I think it's a very prudent, very practical move on part of Australia also. And as far as India is concerned also, this move means a lot for us. See, the understanding of my organization, akashindal.in, is it would definitely give a boost to our exports. Last week itself, we had a data which showed that India has achieved a great milestone in exports. Now, if you see Prime Minister Modi's overall vision, make in India, make for the world, we are definitely inching towards that sort of thing where our exports are increasing. And now many of the Indian products would get entry into Australia on a duty-free basis. So that is something which is going to help Indian exports a lot. And for Australia also, they know it does make a lot of sense. Now, my colleague was talking about RCEP. Let me tell you, my research tells you, apart from RCEP having certain disadvantages, if you talk about multilateral trade agreements and bilateral trade agreements always make lot sense in comparison with multilateral trade agreements. Because multilateral trade agreements, what would happen is, there could be 16 countries, 18 countries. Now, strengths, weaknesses, requirements of each and every country are not recognized and understood. Generally, what happens is, it's one country which prevails upon the other countries, and at times what may happen is the country number 2 may not have too much of dealing with country number 12. Wherein bilateral trade agreements, you can understand what the other country wants, you can understand how you can take benefit of that country, and bilateral trade agreements are always much more useful, practical, decisions are taken faster and implemented faster. So I think it's very good on India's part that India is seriously pursuing bilateral trade agreements. This would definitely increase our exports, which are already increasing. So we all know calendar year 2022, India is expected to have a GDP growth. That's what the world is saying, not only Akash Jindal is saying, more than 9%, where the rest of the world, the entire world rather, is expected to go only by 3.5%, US expected to grow by 3.5%, Europe expected to grow by 3%. And as of now, we are definitely the 6th largest economy, quite close to being the 5th largest economy. And in another 6 to 7 years, we will be the 3rd largest economy. So it makes a lot sense for Australia also to have more ties,
Right.
much more ties with India, which would make a lot of economic sense for Australia. And the way Indian exports are growing, India is having bilateral trade ties. I think it would mean much more FDI for India also, not only from Australia, but for from the entire world. I think we'll be receiving much more FDI because of the way our exports are growing, because of the way we are having practical bilateral trade ties. So I would definitely congratulate Prime Minister Modi and Piyush Goyal Saab. They have done a wonderful deal, and I wouldn't go much into the details. There are constraints of time, so I wouldn't.
Okay, Mr. Jindal, point well taken. Professor Nalapas, you spoke about the definitive realization which has come in the politics of Australia to actually decouple from China. Do you think it's a national sentiment now in Australia which exists across party lines, or is it more Scott Morrison specific?
No, it's not Scott Morrison specific, because the Australian people understand the threat that China faces. Even those people, citizens of Australia who are of Chinese origin, they resent the fact that Xi Jinping thinks them to be citizens of the PRC and says that you have to do things like spying and technology transfer, and you have to help the PRC at the expense of Australia. Chinese citizens, Australian citizens of Chinese origin, almost all of them are patriotic Australians. They resent such pressure. Let me point out that, Pathikrit is very correct about RCEP. If India had signed RCEP, India would have been the loser and China the gainer. But I would like to say one problem about the European Union. The European Union, of course, they say they're not racist, and I believe they're not racist. But the policies that they pursue, even a third-rate or a fourth-rate or a fifth-rate service and technology sourced from within Europe, they prefer that to the best technologies sourced from India. That is the problem in the European Union. They feel that even a third-rate European product is better than a first-grade Indian product. And this has been the problem about the FTA. They don't want Indian services. They don't want, for example, anything in which India has got a qualitative advantage in the knowledge industry, because in their mind, they are 150 years behind the times. They believe, India, it's a backward country. It should do only backward products. So we should sell us handicrafts. It should sell us, matting and things like that. And the fact is, India, yes, parts of it are underdeveloped, parts of it are super developed. And the Europeans don't get that. So once the Europeans get over that mental block and behave with the pragmatism, and if I may say so, the humanism and understanding that we are all part of one humanity that Scott Morrison is showing and the Australians are showing, well, it will be better for Europe. I want to just end by saying what Mr. Menon said is right about that $5. And this only shows, had better priced Indian products been allowed under the agreement, the Australians would have gained. Whenever the Australians pander to the Europeans, and there is a segment of the Australian voters who believe that Australia, like Scotland and Wales, is a part of the United Kingdom or Europe, located in the Indo-Pacific. It's not. It's an Indo-Pacific country. The fact is that if this $5 cap had been removed and it had been no cap, Australian consumers would have benefited. Whenever Australia goes by the interests of the European Union instead of the Australian interests, the Australian consumer suffers, and this absurd cap of $5 that Mr. Menon was talking about is one more example of this small voting bloc that doesn't realize Australia is very much an Indo-Pacific country and not a part of Europe that has somehow floated into Asia.
All right. Ambassador Mukherjee, so the general consensus on the panel is on bilateral agreements rather than ones like RCEP. What do you think should follow now? Which country is next?
Sorry, you asked
Manju
me?
said, I beg your pardon, Manju
Yeah,
said.
you said Mukherjee, so I thought you asked me someone
I
else.
beg your
Sorry.
pardon, yes.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry, could you repeat your question? Because I said
What
someone
next?
else.
Which,
What next?
which country is next, ma'am?
UK is wanting to have an FTA done at the earliest, but if they continue with their rigidity and their insistence on only meeting their own interests and not accommodating India's concerns, I'm not sure it will be signed very quickly. As mentioned earlier also by other panelists, the tariffs and the mindset that is imposed on Indian products because they are from India, unfortunately, is a fact of life. And they do have a lot of hesitation in removing these tariffs on Indian products because they think that how could India possibly have any such claim to quality. Unfortunately, that is quite true. Though of course it is changing gradually, and there are people who understand that this is no longer the case, and they do understand that India and India's huge market. One, India's high tech, high quality manpower. So they have tried in Europe to. I don't know right now what the status is, but they had this proposal to issue a blue card for all Indian professionals to move freely between the European Union. But I haven't checked lately that actually came about or not. But it was there. The proposal was there when they recognized that it would be advantageous for them as well. But still, mindsets don't change so easily. And with which other country will next conclude an FTA is difficult to say at the moment. But if mutual concerns and mutual benefit is seen in any particular FTA, I'm sure India would like to go ahead, and so would the other countries.
All right, Suresh Menon, last thoughts with you. What next do you expect? Because you specifically for your sector, and then we'll take a more general view on the same.
Yeah, before I go into that question, Gauri, one clarification. The $5 threshold is on the imports from Australia into India, not from India to Australia. As far as Australia is concerned,
I'm glad to hear that. Glad to hear that. Very good.
As far as Australia is concerned, they have given complete tariff elimination for all exports from India from the date that this agreement goes into force. So we were talking. I was referring to the import where there is a threshold of $5. Ideally, the better quality wines that come into the country, I think the wine culture would probably be able to spread quickly in the country. As far as your question, Gauri, about what next, I think for the longest while, the impression that the world carried about India was that India only spoke of free trade agreements, but never actually got around to actioning them. Agreements like the Australian one, the EU one, etc., have all been spent kind of in limbo for a decade and more. Similarly, I think UK is now an FTA where there is some progress, and they have had 2 rounds of discussions. Hopefully, there will be an early harvest agreement, and with a final FTA coming up maybe in about 12 to 15 months thereafter. So I think UK is the one that is of importance to this sector. Right. And I think that's what we expect to be on the cards next.
Okay, moving beyond the alcohol and beverages sector, particular pain, what next? Which countries next, and what kinds of sectors do you think we should focus on next?
This is for me?
Yeah, this is for Patikrit. Can you unmute himself, please? Is he on the broadcast with us? All right, Akash Jindal, take that. Akash Jindal, please take that, sir.
Yeah, please repeat the question.
What sectors next and what countries next? If you could just sum that up for us.
I think European countries, particularly UK I think there's lot possibility as far as trade is concerned, as far as exports are concerned. Now Indian quality is being recognized, though slowly but surely. I just told you 1 week ago we have clocked in huge numbers of export for this year. So I think UK is one. Then there are many other European countries where we could sign agreements. And I think the Indian way of going in for bilateral agreements is ultimately proving. It's playing well. And I think the world is now recognizing India's economic strength. The Indian economy becoming stronger, much more stronger than earlier, is being recognized by the world. So going ahead, I think there could be many bilateral trade agreements which India could enter. Of course, there is a possibility, though it's, I wouldn't say it has reached a much higher state, but with some other American countries also, it could happen. So I think going ahead, there could be many agreements and there could be a huge increase in Indian exports. See, the Indian economy strength is being seen by everybody. Now, post-pandemic, of course, during pandemic, that particular year, we also had a negative GDP growth, but see about our neighbors, how Sri Lanka crashed and cracked post-pandemic, how the condition of Pakistan is, how negative rating agencies are viewing Pakistan negatively. But India, in spite of being a huge population, after the pandemic, we are back on track, having a decent number of exports, talking bilateral trade ties, increasing GDP, and as I told you, I will repeat it, for calendar year 2022, we are going to have again the fastest GDP growth amongst bigger countries. So I think there are many other bilateral trade ties which are going to happen. And again, mark my word, the research of my organization, Akash Jindal, tells in bilateral trade ties are ultimately going to prove much better than the multilateral trade ties. And India, the way it's going for bilateral trade ties, that's going to ultimately have practical benefits as far as exports is concerned, as GDP is concerned. And this particular deal is going to have generation of around 1 million jobs. That is something which India requires as of now, with our huge population increasing every year. So I think 1 million job generation is again a great positive, which we are going to achieve with this deal. So I think much more exports. And again, I think we are seriously pursuing the theme of our visionary Prime Minister Modi, make in India, make for the world. I think 2 years, 3 years from now, India would be started recognized as a manufacturing power, if not as a superpower, and of course a country which is quite serious about exports and quality exports.
All right. Okay. A point well taken. I thank all my panelists for joining us for this broadcast. We will, of course, continue tracking all such agreements here on NewsX.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.